It's a powerful prayer. It's in Psalm 90. We'll get there in a few minutes. What by the numbers that idea of the importance of using time well made me think of something kind of funny. I've been dealing with some health problems, and I read this a couple of days ago about a man who's gone in for his annual physical, and he got a call from his doctor, and the doctor said, sir, I've got some bad news. He said, what? He said, well, you only have 48 hours left to live. He said, oh, that's terrible news. The doctor said, well, I'm afraid it's even worse news. I've been trying to reach you for a day, and I couldn't. So you've heard the phrase, time is of the essence, haven't you? It truly is. Even if you don't have an impending death sentence hanging over your head, time is really important. And someone said, you can't waste time without injuring eternity. You cannot waste time without injuring eternity. In other words, what we do in time, under the leadership of the Holy Spirit and guidance from what God has revealed to us, has eternal implications. And if we live in apathy or ignorance to those truths as well, that's going to injure the impact that we're going to have and also diminish the reward that we could inherit. Well, as I said, we're gonna go to Psalm 90, but we're gonna get there by Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13, and if you know the history of Israel, you know that someone who played large and almost larger than life in their history was a man named Moses. Moses was an amazing human being, truly a dynamic leader, a man mightily used of God, and at times a very austere man. But as you read different things about his life, you see that he had a very tender heart toward the Lord. In fact, there was one point when God said, Moses, I'm not going to go with you. And Moses was like, well then I don't want to go either. You won't go, I'm not going. And Moses wanted to be close to the Lord. And the Bible talks about how Moses had a unique relationship with God. God spoke to him like a friend, it says in the Old Testament. So he had an amazing connection with the Lord. But prior to Moses' deep connection with God, he attempted to do things his way in his time with his resources, and it was a dismal failure. He killed an Egyptian in his attempt to deliver Israel, and when word got out, he had to flee for his life, and he spent the next 40 years living as an outcast somewhere out in the boondocks. Got married, had a little family, and his occupation was shepherd. And those could have seemed like wasted years to Moses, but I don't think they were. I think God used those years to equip him to become the leader that he needed to be of the rebellious lost sheep of the house of Israel. Well, Moses eventually reconnects with God and God's plan, and he follows the Lord in his plan to go to Egypt. And for the next 80 years, Moses sees God's faithfulness time after time. 80 years of ministry. Moses lived to be 120 years old. Well, we find Moses today in our context in Numbers chapter 13. And they're on the border of the promised land. And Moses is about to send 12 spies, one spy for each one of the tribes of Israel, into this promised land to do a reconnaissance mission. And they're to go and assess the land. And verse 17, Moses says, go up this way into the south and go up to the mountains and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are forests there or not. Well, the spies go out, and they spend about 40 days out in that land looking around, and when they come back, they give a report to the people. And let's see, I think that's in verse 27. Numbers 27, the spies come back and they say, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. In verse 23, it describes how they had cut down some grapes because it was the season of grapes, and they were massive, beautiful, luscious pieces of fruit. And so they're saying great things, and if if we didn't revere the Bible so much, we might want to scratch out whatever word starts verse 28 and put the word but in there, because there's a but coming. The land is great, it's fruitful, it's amazing, but nevertheless, is what my Bible says, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. Then Caleb, one of the spies, quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are able to overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Anak came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." And then look at the response of the people of Israel, chapter 14. It says, "So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron and the whole congregation, and said to them, 'If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?' So they said to one another, 'Let us select a leader and return to Egypt.' Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to the congregation, the children of Israel, saying, 'The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them.' And all the congregation said to stone them with stones." And thankfully at that point, God intervenes. Do you see what just happened there? The nation of Israel is on the threshold of this great new opportunity. They're about to go into this promised land, as the spies said, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of so much wonder and richness. And two of the spies are men of faith, and they're going to trust the Lord. And they bring a good report, and they say, "We can do this. God is with us. If God favors us, it's not a problem." Oh, it'll be a fight. I'm sure they knew that. But if God is with us, it'll be okay. But the 10 faithless spies poisoned the minds and hearts of the people. And they were so filled with fear, they wanted to appoint a new leader and make a trek back to Egypt where they could be slaves again. How delightful. Oh, my goodness. Well, as I read that story, I thought, it's fitting to give that as a background for what we're about to read over in Psalm 90. If you've tracked through the Psalms at all, you might know just as there are 5 books of the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, there are 5 books for the Psalms. And each one of those books of the Psalms corresponds to one of those books of the Pentateuch. And the 4th book of the Psalms begins with Psalm 90, and that's where we find ourselves today. And that's the one that corresponds to the book of Numbers. Psalm 90. It's a great psalm, and I hope you'll be really encouraged by it this morning. I'm making my way over there right now. All right. Psalm 90 says, Lord, and I wanted to read the title to it too. It says, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. A prayer of Moses, the man of God. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn men to destruction and say, return, O children of men. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night. You carry them away like a flood. They are like a sleep. In the morning they are like grass which grows up. In the morning it flourishes and grows up. In the evening it is cut down and withers. For we have been consumed by your anger, and by your wrath we are terrified. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years. And if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow. For it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord. How long? And have compassion on your servants. O satisfy us early with your mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad according to the days in which you have afflicted us, the years in which we have seen evil. Let your work appear to your servants, and your glory to their children. And let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. And Father, we echo Moses' prayer. We pray that in this world where we work and we sigh and we have sorrow, Lord, we pray in the midst of it we'll have joy, and we will see the work that you're doing, and we'll be able to join you, and that you will be able to establish the work of our hands. Lord, help us to have that eternal perspective as we live in a world with a passing parade of humanity all around us. Fill us with strength and joy this morning, and give us wisdom for the new year. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, as we are about to work through that chapter, it's kind of interesting, that God is. It seems kind of hard on these people, and we might ask, well, why was the Lord so difficult and so hard on these people? Why didn't He allow some of them to go into the Promised Land? Well, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Back over in actual Numbers 14, after God intervenes and prevents them from stoning Caleb and Joshua, in verse 27, God says, how long shall I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me? I have heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Say to them, as I live, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in the wilderness, all of you who were numbered according to the entire number from 20 years old and above, except for Caleb and Joshua. So God basically says to that generation of people who were adults that came out of Egypt, because of your unbelief and your predictions of gloom and doom, I'm going to give you what you're asking for. You're not going into my promised land. The next 40 years you're going to spend walking around the wilderness until every one of you dies off. That's harsh, isn't it? Why was God so hard on them? Well, Numbers 14:22, and I jumped ahead to Psalm 90, I'm sorry, but I meant to go back to Numbers 14:22. A very important principle emerges in Numbers 14:22. God says that he says, true, because all these men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness and have put me to the test, now these 10 times that have not heeded my voice, they shall certainly not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. So basically what I think God is impressing upon us is that God's judgment on those people was so severe because they had had so many opportunities to see the powerful, mighty hand of God. Can you imagine being one of the children of Israel and watching those 10 plagues that the book of Exodus shows unfold? Can you imagine all that God did to basically just humiliate the gods of Egypt? That idolatrous nation realized our gods are nothing compared to Yahweh. And then the height of the power, yes, there was the death of the firstborn, which was a huge shock to the people of Egypt, but then the parting of the Red Sea. Israel saw all of that. And so they must have said, wow, this is incredible. In fact, do you remember how Israel responded after the Red Sea parting? Moses and Aaron's sister, I forgot her name now, she's Miriam, takes a tambourine and they're dancing around. I will sing unto the Lord. He has triumphed gloriously, the horse and rider thrown into the sea. They were so excited, so happy. Well, they saw the power of God unleashed in the plagues, and they walked through the Red Sea as on dry ground, and God miraculously made a way of escape for them, and they were sustained by the Lord's provision as they went from Egypt into the wilderness to the Promised Land. They had every reason to think, God's met us every step of the way. Why is he going to fail us now? But when they got to the next test, they totally fell down. They folded like a cheap suit. Well, I think here's a vital principle, and I really think we can put this into practice. God operates on the principle of graduated accountability. Graduated accountability. What I mean by that is, if you don't know much about the Lord and you haven't had many experiences with the Lord, he doesn't expect as much of you. If you're young in your faith compared to someone who's been around a long time. Luke 12:48 says, to whom much is given, much will be required. The more you know, the more God expects from you. The more you have, the more God expects you to wisely invest in what he has shown you is important. And so in other words, when God pours out blessings on your life and imparts resources to you to support and sustain you, he expects you to remember that. Just like the children of Israel when they prepared to go into the Promised Land under Joshua's leadership after that generation died off that was rebellious, Joshua said, let's gather stones of remembrance. And they piled them on the riverbanks. And Joshua said, this is so that you in years to come can say to your children, look at what God did to get us here. And by the way, when they crossed the Jordan into the Promised Land, God also caused the Jordan to back up, and they crossed on dry ground, kind of a mini Red Sea crossing for that next generation. Isn't that great? Well, you know, when God does great things in our lives, he wants us to keep trusting him. And so if we've had God come through in the past, if we're facing a new test or a new fearful situation, we shouldn't say, oh, woe is me, I'm dead meat, I'm roadkill. We should say, no, just like God met me then, he's going to meet me now, because God is the same, yesterday, today, and forever. You know, this is one of those guiding principles that has honestly kept me from throwing in the towel. When I came back from the Philippines sicker than I could imagine, and kind of disillusioned, not only with God, but with the leaders of my mission, and I really sought the Lord, I finally said, you know what? Too much has been invested in me already. I can't walk away. If I walk away, I will be committing a grievous sin against the Lord. I don't know why I got sick. I don't know what happened to me, but I'm trusting God with it. And you know what has actually happened? I think I've probably had a more fruitful ministry because I've been broken and crushed and brought to the brink of just utter desperation many times. And I've walked with God through that. I think I've had more fruit because of that than if I would have had easy slide through kind of ministry. You know what I'm saying? I think you have more credibility when you've been broken and you get up out of the ashes and you say, I'm going to go on. And I love what Jim Elliot said. He said, I would rather fail at a cause I know will succeed than succeed at a cause that I know will fail. I thought about a lot of different career opportunities I could have gone into. In fact, I said to Nancy, you know, as hard as I've worked over the years, I probably could have made quite a bit of money, but I never had peace that was what I was supposed to do. So I've gone into things like pastoral care, chaplain work, just a lot of volunteer work, because I think people matter. Two things matter in eternity: people and the Word of God. And if you can bring those two things together in the same place, I think you're really onto something. I dropped a piece of paper. I wrote myself a little note. I said, remember the C.T. Studd quote. Do you know who C.T. Studd was? He was a wealthy cricket player from England, and he walked away from a fortune to become a Christian missionary. And you know what he said? Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. And when I'm dying, how happy I'll be if the lamp of my life was burned out for thee. Kind of puts it in perspective, doesn't it? If he would die for me, no sacrifice I make on this earth is too great to be made for him. I believe God will reward us for being faithful. In fact, didn't Jesus say not even a cup of cold water would be overlooked? Not even a cup of cold water given to someone in the Lord's name will be overlooked. If God will reward you for that, you didn't make the water, you just scooped it out of a bucket or got it out of a faucet. If God will reward you for that, what about bigger things? What about running the race of faith? Hebrews 12 says, we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, the people who've died before us in faith, and we are therefore to run the race marked out for us, looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep running the race God set before you. Revelation 2:10 says, be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. Be faithful. God doesn't ask you to be successful. He asks you to be faithful. All you can do is be true to the opportunities that come your way and leave the results or the lack of results in God's hands. Just trust the Lord. I wonder, what are you doing with what God has poured into your life? You know, I've talked to a few of you, and I know that in your past there were precious Sunday school teachers, dear pastors, some people that probably you look back on and think, could God really use somebody like him? But well they did. God did. And you know, God has poured things into your life. Are you using what God has entrusted to you? Are you being a good steward of spiritual resources? You know, we hear stewardship sermons, and they're usually about greenbacks. They're usually about money, right? And we think, oh boy, protect my wallet. Don't let them get a hold of that. You know, I think we've got to be equally as concerned about how we use our time. Time is, I think, even more important than money. You can always earn more money, but you can't get back time. What are you doing with your talents and the time that God has entrusted to you? Well, God wants us to be faithful, and so Israel, because they had seen and experienced great interventions from God, should have followed the lead of Caleb and Joshua, but instead they lived in fear and refused to accept the next challenge that God had put before them, and God judged them severely for their unbelief. And for the next 40 years, day after day, Israel wandered around in the wilderness on a death march till that whole generation died off. And you know, sometimes it's interesting to me. I hear people say, you know, I used to go to church, I used to serve the Lord, but I got hurt by the church, and I just can't do that anymore. And I think, if you read the Bible and you read about a guy like Moses, think about all the pain Moses experienced, not because of what he did, but because of those knuckleheads who didn't want to follow into the promised land. Don't you think that was painful for Moses? 40 years in the wilderness. Okay, guys, another lap around Sinai. Here we go. I don't think it was a great time. And if we used a little sanctified imagination as we go into Psalm 90, I think it'll help us. This is what I picture. They're wandering around Sinai's wilderness, and it's been years since they were at Kadesh Barnea and wouldn't go into the promised land. And they're on a death march in the desert, doing those laps around Sinai, getting nowhere. It's just an utter futility of life. And every morning, representatives from the various tribes of Israel report to Moses with a fresh report of the casualties. And you know what Moses hears? Death, 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 death. More death. Obituaries are the most common news item. And as they break camp for the next day's march, you know what they leave behind them? Another cemetery. More bodies out there in the wilderness. Scholars estimate that 2 million Israelites died in the wilderness over that 40-year wandering. Can you imagine that? Moses' heart must have been breaking as he thought, oh, you foolish people, why didn't you trust this awesome God who led us out of the wilderness? With that kind of as background, let's look at the first couple of verses of Psalm 90, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. He says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. That's so beautiful. Moses sees the Lord as his dwelling place. And that word dwelling place can also be translated refuge, as it is in Deuteronomy 33, where it says, the eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Same word. God is a refuge. God is our dwelling place. And so while Moses sees people all around him dying, you know where he takes his refuge? In the Lord. In the Lord. He knows that God is eternal, and Moses knew that he had an eternal spirit. And even though he was seeing people dying all around him, he knew that God was going to sort all of that out. And he put his trust in the God who exists from eternity to eternity. The infinite, eternal, unchanging, wise, all-powerful, holy, just, true, and good God. And you know, as we live our lives, I think we do well to do the same. Stay close to the Lord, because he's our refuge. And if we do that, I think like Moses, we too can live with eternity in view. We too can live our lives and leverage our lives so we invest them in what God has revealed will really count to him. In verse 3, Moses says to the Lord, he says, Lord, you turn man to destruction and say, return, O children of men. And Moses had seen a lot of destruction. He saw the Egyptians get judged, and now he's seeing the nation of Israel get judged. And as I read Moses' life, you know, I think he felt secure and close to the Lord. But I think because of all that Moses saw, I think Moses really feared the Lord too. In fact, isn't it kind of silly to not fear the Lord? A God who could speak a universe like this one into being? I think we ought to fear a God like that, right? The Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is to depart from evil. And so once you fear the Lord, I think a lot of the lesser priority things fall into place. And just as God had told fallen Adam, from dust you are and to dust you will return, God continues to say to the human race, return, O children of men, meaning return to the dust. Why is that? Well, I think it's because God, though he's merciful and kind, is also holy, and he takes sin very seriously. And that's why gatherings where you hear the Bible preached and where you take time to read the Bible are so critical, because our culture has rejected the Judeo-Christian heritage that it's been built on and that has allowed for human flourishing. And like Israel of old, our culture is wandering off in unbelief. And I think you can only do that for a short amount of time before God says, game over. I'm done with this. And I think we're starting to see some calamitous things happen in our country. So I think we're going to be severely disciplined, so we need to stay close to the Lord. In verses 4 to 6, it says, we see God's perception of time. 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it's past, and like a watch in the night. You carry them away like a flood. They are like sleep. In the morning they are like grass which grows up. In the morning it flourishes and grows up. In the evening it's cut down and withers. From God's eternal perspective, the days and years and even millennia pass quickly. God's in eternity, and he looks at this world and he's like, you know, it's only been a short time since Jesus was there. And for us, our few years of life, even if they be 90 years, we think, wow, that's kind of a long time. And God's like, that's like nothing. Our lives are like a blip on the screen compared to God's eternal perspective. In verses 7 and 8, it says, we see God's awareness of all sin and his attitude towards sin. Verse 7 says, we have been consumed by your anger, and by your wrath we are terrified. For you have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. You know, there's no such thing as a secret sin in heaven. Someone once said that secret sin on earth is open scandal in heaven. We might think we're able to pull one over on other people, but God sees right through it all, doesn't he? And if we're wise, we'll take to heart the severity of God's response to Israel's sin and not intentionally defy God's will. I may have talked a little bit about this before, but you know, in 2020, there was an event that really hurt my heart. There was a Christian evangelist named Ravi Zacharias, who I had followed for many years. I have a number of his books. I would often listen to his podcasts. I felt like as someone who appreciates apologetics, I enjoyed Ravi Zacharias. Well, he passed away in 2020, and his motto, helping the thinker believe and the believer think, just really resonated with me, and I know it did with many other people. But just a few months after his passing, 3 women came forward and began to accuse him of sexual misconduct. All of them had worked in spas, like massage parlors, not nasty, icky places, but reputable places where people with physical problems could come and get a massage. And Ravi Zacharias apparently had chronic back pain. But over a period of 5 years, these women said that he had behaved in very ungodly ways toward him. And they had even attempted to make his ministry, Ravi Zacharias International Ministry, know what he had been doing. But Zacharias was pretty skillful at deflecting criticism, and he turned the tables on these people. And before he knew it, he had his staff attacking them and running them down, and they really got nowhere. Their character was impugned. Well, following his death, a more thorough investigation happened, and his own ministry finally released a report that said that they had been deceived, that Ravi Zacharias had actually been involved in a lot of sexual misconduct over many years and in multiple contexts, as well as text and email-based relationships with women who were not his wife. And I was stunned. This man, Ravi Zacharias, such a gifted communicator of the gospel, had been living a double life. He stood up in public and offered salvation, forgiveness of sins through Jesus Christ, and then he would go off the stage and wander off to some location and do vile things that we wouldn't even want to talk about. And you know, as the dust settled on that investigation, it was revealed that part of the reason that Ravi was able to deceive others for so long was because Ravi Zacharias International Ministries was an unhealthy organization where they allowed a shadow culture to exist. And as I read some of this to Nancy the other day, and I said, this makes so much sense. What they described was this. They said, a shadow culture is what occurs when there's one set of standards for the rank and file people and a different set of standards for the elite. And if the staff members challenge anything, they're punished for their disloyalty. Wow, talk about dysfunction, right? That's exactly what was going on. And in hindsight, the leaders of RZIM said, we realized that we allowed Ravi to operate one way and required our staff to operate another way. For instance, they said, we said everybody should have a phone issued from the organization and use an email address that can be checked at any time, but we allowed Ravi to have an encrypted BlackBerry that he owned that could be erased whenever he wanted, and the messages were unretrievable once deleted, and he had his own private email account. And they said that's just kind of a low-level issue, but it's just a sign of the lack of accountability that was there. And what they said is that there was a sense of exceptionalism around Ravi Zacharias, and so they had rules for thee but not for me kind of thing for him. And one of the articles that I read said, you know, when Ravi Zacharias traveled, he would say, you know, I've been away for 300 days on the road, while the rest of the staff could only be away 120 days a year, so they should be back in church at least twice a Sunday twice a month with their own congregation. Why am I telling you all that? For this reason. As your pastor, the point I want us to consider is this. Anyone, any of us, me, you, anybody, could be derailed into gross immorality by the powers of darkness. And if that organization that Ravi had been a part of had been just a little more careful and intentional, maybe they could have kept him from falling off the rails and not only destroying his own ministry, but ruining other people's lives as well. And what I want to urge you is this. We need to look out for each other. We need to know each other well enough that we can say, how are you really doing today? I think there's something going on. You don't seem right. And the only way you get to know people is by spending time with them. Please spend time with each other. I urge you, get to know each other. That's so vital. If you can get to know each other, you can offer each other positive accountability because we are our brother's keeper. You know, Ravi Zacharias used to say, sin will take you farther than you want to go. It'll keep you longer than you want to stay, and it'll cost you more than you want to pay. He was right on. And that's exactly what happened in his ministry. His sin cost him and his ministry dearly. After his death and the revelation of his double life, RZIM changed their name and restructured their organization, resulting in 60% of their 300-member staff losing their jobs. The Christian and Missionary Alliance denomination revoked his credentials, and HarperCollins stopped printing his books. What's the takeaway in all of that? Don't play with fire. You'll get burned. Fires are great if they're in a fireplace, but if you put a fire in the middle of the carpeting in the living room, look out, right? Sexual behavior is great in God-given contexts, but if it's misapplied, like Ravi Zacharias did, a lot of people are going to get hurt. The Bible says, whatever sin you're involved in, your sin will find you out. And we should flee from sin. We shouldn't play games with evil. The Bible says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever we sow, that we will also reap. And those of you who've done gardening and farming, you know that if you plant one kernel of corn, you don't just get one little kernel in return, do you? You get maybe a plant with a stalk and multiple ears. Think of all the sin that is reaped as we sow sin. It just multiplies. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. The wages of sin is still death, and the soul that sins will die. Well, Israel learned that the hard way, but God left us a record of their tragedy and their disastrous end to help us to get to the point of saying, well, how should we now live? And in Psalm 90, verse 9, it says, we should remember that we are frail and feeble. For all our days pass away under God's wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as your fear, so is your wrath. What does that mean? It means sin has infected all of our bodies. Anybody doing any sighing or groaning lately when you walk upstairs or get out of bed or out of the chair? Why is that? Aging is not for the faint of heart, is it? Because we're all actually marching from the cradle to the grave. That's not the end of the story if you're a Christian, is it? It's not. We have a glorious future in front of us. But we live in sin-infected bodies through the bloodline of Adam and Eve. And that doesn't mean every time somebody gets sick, God is punishing them, does it? It sure doesn't. In many instances, disease comes to us because we are the descendants of Adam and Eve, and we live in a sinful world that's been affected by the fall. I told our board this last week I'm dealing with a number of health problems, including progressive Parkinson's disease. And it's kind of scary. Kind of scary. But you know what I also believe? I don't believe I caused Parkinson's disease to come into my life. And I think if it's come into my life, I think it's been filtered through the loving hands of a powerful, caring God. If he gave me this disease, it's purposeful. And I don't understand it. I may never understand it, but I'm not giving up on God. I don't think I brought it upon myself, and I don't think I can solve it myself. I need to keep walking with the Lord. But doesn't verse 10 say that God will give people 70 years of life? Don't I have that to look forward to? No. God doesn't guarantee or promise anybody will live to any length of day, does he? It says 70 years, and then it talks about 80 years. And that psalm is saying that because of sin, if you happen to live to the age of 70 or longer, your life's going to get increasingly hard. Life on this earth is one of, to use those verses, labor, sorrow, and sighing. It's tough, isn't it? Well, maybe we should just all retire when we get to 65. I don't think so. I really think that we should be like Moses. We should die with our sandals on. At the end of Moses' journey, God said, come on, Moses, we're going up on Mount Nebo, I think it was. And Moses got to see the promised land from afar. And then God said, come on, buddy. You're going home. God buried Moses' body. Or Israel probably would have done something weird and quirky with that too, worshiped the cadaver, I don't know. But as Moses surveyed the grave-strewn landscape on Mount Sinai, you know what he was driven to do? He didn't walk away from God and say, God, I'm so sick of this. I'm so tired of it. I'm not going to walk with you anymore. You know what he did? I think he got in his tent and he got on his knees and he cried out to God. And he said, oh God, you've been our refuge, our dwelling place for all generations. That's where Moses went. And at the end of this passage, verse 12, he says to God, he says, so teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. What is Moses praying for? He's praying for wisdom. And we should too. You need wisdom. You don't know how long you're going to be here. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to continue doing what I do. But I know this. God wants to give us wisdom and guidance so that we can use what we have for as long as we have for His glory and the good of others. You believe that today? I do with all my heart. As Moses looked around, he said, God, give me wisdom. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. You see, our days are numbered. God knows our expiration date. We don't. But the message is you won't be here indefinitely. A day is coming when we're going to look in the paper and we're going to say, oh, look at that. There's his obituary. Or online, oh, there, look, she died. You might live to an old age, or you might not. Therefore, you need to be ready at a moment's notice to leave this world. Don't be like that foolish farmer Jesus mentioned in his parable in Luke 12, where the man said, I've got all this abundant stuff. Luke 12:16, he said, I'm going to say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. And God said, you fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? That foolish man assumed he had lots of time, years and years to get things straightened out. God said, nope, game over. This is the night. This is the day. And so I want to say to each one of us, get right with God. That's the wisest thing you can do. Don't put it off. Don't put it off. Don't wait. You don't know that you have tomorrow. And then Moses ends his prayer by praying for God's mercy and God's blessing. He says, return, O Lord, how long? At the beginning of Psalm 90, the word return was there, and it was used in reference to God returning sinning human beings to the dust from which they came in judgment. But here Moses, who knew God was a God of faithfulness without injustice, the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 28, ascribe greatness to our God the rock. His works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A God of faithfulness without injustice. That's the God Moses trusted in. And so as Moses goes to God, he says, God, I ask you to return to us and be merciful to us. And he says, how long? How long, Lord? Have compassion on your servants. Oh, satisfy us early with your mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all of our days. As Moses is talking about mercy, you know what that word mercy is? It's a powerful Hebrew word. You have to get a little saliva in your throat to make the word. It's chesed. Chesed. It's God's covenant love. It's God's covenant faithfulness. Unfailing love, covenant love, mercy. All those words come from that word chesed. And you know what it means? God keeps his promises. God keeps his promises. And one of my favorite promises is just a couple of chapters before this in Psalm 84, where it says, no good thing does God withhold from those whose walk is upright. No good thing. So if you've trusted Jesus as your Savior, as the one who took your sins, and then to the best of your understanding of the Bible, you're walking with God, you can be confident that no good thing will God withhold. What do you need? You need a place to live? You need food to eat? God will take care of you. Are you lonely? You want a partner for life? I think God would want to provide that as well. Don't discount God in any way. God can do anything. If God could part the Red Sea, if he could raise Jesus from the dead, the Spirit of God who lives in you, he can work in you and through you, and he can do anything. And this God that Moses prayed to is a God who longs to be merciful, a God who longs to be compassionate. Don't distort and mischaracterize this God. He's good. He loves you. He wants the best for you. Don't ever sell out to the father of lies. Don't ever believe that liar Satan who says, oh, you can't trust God if you go it your own way. Go and get rich. Go and have a sensual relationship. That's where the good life is. Baloney! God's path is narrow. His ways are perfect. Follow Jesus. Be obedient, and he will bless you. It doesn't mean you'll have the word blessing with B-L-E, $, but you will be enriched. When you lay your head down at night, you'll be able to say, I am at peace with the living God. When you get up and stand before a group of people, you'll be able to say, Lord, you know I've done my best to serve you and to love you. There's great joy and riches in following the Lord. And so this psalm, this prayer of Moses, I hope this is your prayer in the new year. God, teach me to number my days. Be merciful and gracious and compassionate to me so that I can in turn invest in what matters to you. Will you invest in what matters to God? You know what matters to God? That you know him as he's revealed himself in this book. Could I just ask one more thing of you before I close? Would you really take time this new year to read this Bible? Jesus said, this is eternal life, that they may know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you've sent. You know how you get to know him? By knowing this book, and then by living out this book. John 14:21 says, whoever has my commands and obeys them, he's the one who loves me. And then it gets better. He who loves me, Jesus said, will be loved by my Father. I too will love him and will manifest or reveal myself to him. So as you walk in increasing obedience to what you know what happens? You get to know God better and better. Amos 3:3 says, can two walk together if they're not agreed? It doesn't happen. If my wife wants to walk out one door and I want to walk out another door, we have to come to a new agreement and say, let's take a third alternative and go out that door. If you want to walk with God, you've got to go God's way. He's not much for cutting deals from what I've seen. Sometimes it's God's way or the highway. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. God loves you, friend. Read this book and figure out what God is like based on what he's revealed, and then step out in faith. Trust him to meet you. You'll be enriched as you do. If you'd like any recommendations about a good Bible reading plan, I found one recently. It takes about a chapter a day, and in 2 years you can read through the whole Bible. It's very doable, and I'd love to share that with you. Well, anyway, I've gone over time. I've said probably more than I should, but I love you. I really care about you. I want you to follow God. No good thing will God withhold from those whose walk is upright. Psalm 84:11. Psalm 34 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desire of your heart. Delight yourself in knowing God, understanding God, and you'll begin to see things unfold in your life that you may never have realized before. Well, thank you for allowing me to go a little over time today. I just really wanted to give you the background on that great psalm. And let's just close with one or two verses out of that great hymn, O God, our help in ages past. It is, I had my paper here and I've misplaced it. I don't know where it is. O God, our help in ages past. In the little maroon songbook. Do you see it?